CMQ investors, welcome to the show. This is Chris Franco, and I want to share with you what is one of the biggest concerns people have about Alibaba, and that is the risk of Alibaba being delisted. Last Thursday, there was a lot of panic selling that happened. It's still happening now, but it's not just for this reason. The panic selling on Thursday and Friday anyway was mostly attributed to the SEC's release of 5 Chinese-based companies that would be kind of the first to be held to this new law that's called the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act, or the HFCAA. It's a way to protect American shareholders. Basically, they have to have their books looked at by U.S. auditors, and then those auditors have to be audited. Alibaba and other Chinese-based companies will eventually need to comply with this. They have till 2024. If they don't, then they'll be delisted. What's not being reported enough, I think, is the fact that the Chinese authorities seem to be okay with this. And I'll read you an actual quote here that, again, you're not really seeing this a lot. It's mostly like kind of drilling up this narrative that, it's like U.S. versus China. The South China Morning Post says that the relevant regulators of China and the U.S. have started the negotiations over the regulatory cooperation issues and have made some progress. And that's according to a statement from the China Securities Regulatory Commission, which I can only assume it's like the Chinese equivalent of the SEC. Reuters on March 14th said the China securities regulator also gave investors a measure of assurance on Friday, saying it was confident it would reach an agreement with U.S. counterparts to solve the auditing dispute. A lot of the media that I initially was reading about this issue made me feel like that wasn't something, or that wasn't the vibe we were getting from China. And what that kind of brought to my attention, and it led me down a really windy path this weekend, is I need to make sure I'm getting my information about China from as many sources and diverse sources as possible. The common narrative that I come across online, and even in the comments of some of the earlier YouTube videos, is like, you can't trust the CCP for anything. We cannot trust them. They are bad. We are good. It's like Rocky IV or something like that. I could be naive when I say this, but I tend to be a little bit more optimistic because of the incentives at play. I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit from the 2 largest economies, or the 2 nations that have the 2 largest economies in the world, having some real beef. I think it makes a lot more sense for us to ultimately get along. I feel like a lot of this is political posturing. I could be totally wrong. That's just my take. I still want to learn more about the CCP. I'm not naive to all aspects of the CCP, so I don't want anyone thinking that I'm a complete idiot. But in terms of delisting, it could happen, but I also think it's not as big of a risk as, let's say, this next risk, which I think is less likely, but the outcome would be more extreme. Let's say Alibaba agrees to comply with all these new standards, and it turns out that they've been cooking their books. They are the Luck and Coffee 2.0. If that's the case, well, I made one of the big, that was an investment mistake on my part. To be clear, the percentage of Alibaba in my portfolio, it's a meaningful one, but I haven't, bet the farm on it. And the only reason I'm not buying the dip is because there is an X factor here, and that has to do with China. Now, you might say, well, you can educate yourself. And as I mentioned before, I've been trying to do that. The problem is there's just so many conflicting opinions, it's very hard to get a read on the situation. And let me give you a good example here. So on some of the more right-wing leading, call them like policy think tanks, you'll hear them say things like, when an authoritative regime says something, we have to take them at their word. But on the other side of the coin, China's equivalent of the SEC said, hey, we want to figure something out as well. If I take them at their word, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? So then I shouldn't be worried about this. But then someone will say, no, you can't take anything they say seriously. It's all manipulation. I don't know who to believe. I don't know the answer. I don't have the insight. I've never even been to China. So who am I to actually say, what the truth is? It's so important for us as long-term investors to exercise a lot of intellectual humility. I know what I don't know. And if I knew more and truly could know more and have a real insight, then I might be buying, the dip right now. But I think I'm fine with the percentage I have allocated as is, which, as I mentioned, it's meaningful, but it's still a relatively small percentage of my total portfolio. If it goes to zero, the background here won't be me under a bridge, playing the skin flute just for a couple bucks. What happens if, they don't comply and it gets delisted? I don't want to see that outcome. That's not an outcome I'm looking forward to. So I'm hoping that everything kind of works out swimmingly here, but we don't know what the future holds. And I think when you're investing in a company that's in China, as much as I'm optimistic about our long-term ability to cooperate, to get along, to have the 2 worlds kind of come together, I recognize that anything can happen. And one thing is for sure, people have been really beaten up who've tried to make some money by investing in Chinese-based companies. I think it's important to remember, I never said, I never will say that you should do what I'm doing. I'm an individual investor. This is not financial advice. You need to do what's right for you. But I did see some comments that were a little alarming, like people saying they're, they're like 100% Alibaba. I mean, that was only one person, but it freaked me out. So, be responsible with whatever you invest in, obviously, and make sure you consider a wide range of possibilities. That's something that I've read in a lot of books. We don't consider enough possible scenarios. So there's a lot of scenarios that can happen, but I also know the future and those scenarios, there's no way for me to predict them with any sort of precision. You just have to make the best judgment possible. And that's, part of the investment process and part of the process that I enjoy, frankly. So I hope you got something out of this video. Leave a comment, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up. This is the CMQ Investing podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Chris Franco. Talk to you soon.